Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics, and today we have another special guest. Today we're speaking with Pete Simeti. He is the founder and owner of Alterna Comics. They are in their 17th year producing comic books, a lot of amazing comics that I'm sure you've heard of. He also is the author and creator of the newest comic book called King Cryptid. If you haven't purchased that yet, go to alternacomics.com and you could check it out there. Also, about 3 times a year, they have on Indiegogo and on their website, you could purchase the next issues of some of their current comic books that are in publication. So check them out. Indiegogo, just look up Alterna Comics and you'll find it, or go to alternacomics.com. All right, without further ado, here's our conversation that we did live with Pete the other night, and we are posting it on all of our different platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and obviously it is on YouTube. So I hope you enjoy. Please make sure that you subscribe and make sure you hit that follow button, okay? All right, everyone. Here's Pete. All right, everyone. Peter, thanks for joining World at War Comics. It's great to have you, man. Big fan of Alterna and can't wait to dig in and learn a little bit more about your history.
Awesome, man. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. And thank you for making your first live show with me. I
Yeah, no,
appreciate it.
it's definitely first. So if I screw this up, this is not Peter's fault. This is my fault. But so far, it looks like everything's going good, man.
He could blame me. We'll just say that Tommy was really intimidated by having me on.
Yeah. No, I was freaking out, man. I was YouTubing how to do all this, and I was on another show, and they do live. So I reached out to that creator, and he gave me some pointers. So
Oh,
um,
awesome.
yeah, he was really cool about it, Cody, at Keeping It Geekly. So good guy. Let me know some of the know-how, and here we are, man. So Pete, man, I thought maybe we'd just start at the beginning. I know probably a lot of people that are listening in right now have been following Alterna for a long time, and I'm fairly new. It's been a little over a year, but man, I got hooked almost immediately. And it was actually Can't Kill Cade was the first one that I got. Then I went on the website, and you had this deal where I can't remember if it was like $25 or something, and you got a whole bunch of issue number ones from all
Mm.
different creators. And so that was my first entrance into the Alterna universe. And I'm like, holy crap. One, the price point's insane. We could talk about how you do that. And then two, the content, the writing, the art, everything about it. I love that old school feel. I'm sure that has something to do with the cost, but I love it, man. It gives you good memories of, I'm 48 years old. So buying comics in the early 90s, man, it gives me that feel, and I love it, man. A little nostalgia, and the content's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny that you say nostalgia because there's people who, like yourself, have been reading comics for a long time. And for the longest time, comics were on newsprint.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we use.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's also people that are just getting into comics for the first time. And so this is new to them.
Yeah.
So this is new, and they're like, wow, what is this paper stock that only you guys seem to be using? It adds something to the comic, and so it's funny that both kinds of groups of people get something out of it.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, the newsprint adds something, and we didn't always put out single issues on newsprint. For the longest time, we've been around for 17 years. This is our 17th year. Next year, we're legal. So we started off with print on demand, very small.
Yeah.
I didn't, and I've said this interview a million times in terms of the origin of Alterna. So if there's, I start to feel like the Joker from Dark Knight, where maybe I should just
I'm
mix it
sorry to
up,
put you through that,
and
Pete.
it's okay. One of these days, like 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'm just going to start making things up just to see if anybody calls me on it. Uh, but so we did start it off in a way, or I should say I started it off with more or less just wanting to get my own books out there.
Yeah.
I was like 20 or 21, I forget at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever 17 years from now was, I'm 38 now, so yeah, 21, and just making my own book, making really, really bad stuff. It's my first stuff,
That's what you're starting with, right?
yeah, I'm just starting out with it. I've always been drawing, always been writing and reading and everything else, but at a professional level where anyone should pay for it was
Yeah.
debatable at that point in my life, especially. But I figure, you got to make something. If you're never going to make it anything, how are you going to know? So I learned a lot from those first, like, maybe year or so of just making my own stuff, and I learned as much as I could about comics in general. Did a lot of free work, which some people frown upon, but I say don't do it for exposure or anything like that. First of all, you'd never want exposure for your early stuff, really, right? It's
Yeah.
not really that great. Work for free for experience.
Yeah.
And then you build up your portfolio and your skill set, and then you can start actually demanding money,
Yeah.
because you have the skills to back it up and the experience. But so I did that for a little bit, and I started getting submissions coming in, and I felt like, all right, I guess what could it hurt to take on a book or two or three? I let people know I'm very new to this, so this is just going to kind of be like us working together to try and get our comics out there. No distribution, anything like that yet. By 2008, we did have distribution. We had distribution at Diamond and a book publisher, a book distributor at that point for the book market. And for only like, I'd say 10 or 11 years, we just put out primarily graphic novels. Single issues, we started doing that in 2017.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The first single issue that we put out, well, I shouldn't say the first, but the first newsprint single issue that we had put out when I kind of wanted to revamp the lineup because the market was getting so flooded with graphic novels, was May 2017.
Okay.
And it's never been the same since. Graphic novels are great. I still love them for the long form storytelling aspect of it, but there's nothing like single issues.
Yeah.
Especially, the I love telling stories in single issue format. It's a whole different ball game. When I did a graphic novel and someone would read it, they read the whole thing and then they let you know about it.
Yeah.
But single issues, they're guessing, they're engaged, they're wondering about certain plot points and characters. It's a whole different thing. It's like watching a sports game, and you're going from period to period, quarter to quarter, whatever it may be, inning to inning, and you don't know how things are going to unfold until it ends.
Right.
So there's an exciting audience engagement factor to it, and as a creator, I love that.
Yeah.
I love seeing what the theories are for some of the events, and seeing what the favorite characters are from the readers, and then you can kind of plan future issues accordingly too. I love even kind of throwing readers off the scent of certain things and say, oh no, we're not really doing anything else with that character. It's good that you like it, and then bring them back, and they're like, I thought you weren't doing anything. It's so much fun.
I think as a reader, you want that too, right? You want to get onto that next issue.
I would think so, but yeah, we've been doing that since 2017, and it's just, we haven't looked back. It's just been newsprint single issues the whole way.
Yeah. What was your first print single issue?
Remember? First one ever?
Yeah, in 2017 when you went from...
Oh, in 2017.
Print,
so we came out on the scene in May 2017 with Adam Rec #1, Croak #1, Amazing Age #1, and Lilith Dark #1. We were really coming in hot and heavy for the Free Comic Book Day crowd.
Gotcha.
Croak was a mature title, and the rest of them were all ages titles.
Okay.
And they've been done for a while because a lot of them were mini series. We left distribution in 2020, and then that gave me a chance to focus the line more on ongoing series. 'Cause it's a lot harder in distribution as an independent publisher, especially to focus on ongoing, because they look at the sales and they always precipitously fall from issue to issue. If you have, like, Blood Realm, for instance, was a pretty popular series. And it was... Yeah, there's a 3-issue each volume kind of series, and I always hated the fact that we had to do it, but we had to do it this way to kind of keep the numbers up. And Rob had a longer story to tell. Some of these guys didn't. It was like a 4 or 5 issue thing. That was it. But we would go back to #1, and then you get a sales boost, and it falls again, and then you go back to #1, and so each volume had a new #1. Eventually, we went back to print on all of them, and then we kind of kept the numbering correct. I think 7 and 8, which would technically be volume 3, #1 and 2, have not gone back to print just yet. But when they do go back to print, they'll get renumbered as well and have that sequential numbering. I always loved the sequential numbering as a comic book reader. I love the fact that you could see a milestone issue at issue 50 or 100. There's aspects of the comic industry where I think they've grown to lament the higher numbering, but I always was excited by that. If you pick up like issue 1000, let's say, that means there's 999 others. If you like this 1000th issue, go hunt down the rest.
Well, they don't hate it too bad because I just picked up Fantastic Four 7 or 700. So, I mean, they still want to highlight that milestone, right? So they say they hate it, but they certainly want to highlight it when they reach those milestones. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and but yeah, it's strange when and I won't talk too much about the other aspects of the comic industry outside of us, but
Yeah, no, no.
for
Yeah.
for me it was strange when we had to do that, but we had to do that in the distribution system. Now there's no King Cryptid when I go to, issue 40, 50, there's no rebooting, there's no retconning. We're full steam ahead.
Nice, nice. Do you have so your preference is ongoing as an owner of a comic book company, a
My
publisher?
across the board, my preference is ongoing. But yes, so before I was trying to more or less keep that,
Hmm.
I guess, to myself and to my own stories, and be more open to miniseries. But in terms of the practicality of publishing, I also find that it makes more sense at this point because
Hmm.
there are certain books that we've published over the years that were miniseries,
Yeah.
and sometimes they go too far in between without, from issue 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, or so sometimes a creator, because at Alterna it's 100% creator owned, so the creators own all their rights, they pay their creative teams, etc., and then they get paid through royalties and sales.
Gotcha.
So if a royalty, if a creator maybe isn't getting enough work through, or the creative team is having troubles, or there's a delay, or whatever it may be. Let's say issue 1 comes out and then 2 comes out a couple months later, but then 3 is going to take a year.
Yeah.
At that point in time, that's a really big time between issues, Um,
You could lose
so
the
if
reader, right?
Yeah, it'd almost be equivalent to you're watching a movie, you stop it, you come
Yeah.
back to it a week later, and then you come back to it 5 months later.
Yeah.
You're not really going to remember too much about the first, and then you might not even want to at that point, right?
Do I
You
really
might,
want to read the 2 issues I already read 6 months ago, right?
yeah, yeah. So we had a couple instances like that, and
Yeah.
then there
Yeah.
were a couple others where creators they just stopped. A couple of them just were like, I can't do this anymore. Comics are tough, and they are. But if it was an ongoing series where everything was episodic and treated like, each issue is self-contained for the most part, but had an overarching plot,
Yeah.
but you felt you got a story out of each issue, it's
Mhm.
different than if a series gets canceled at issue 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it may be. You're never losing out on what that story was. Where meanwhile, you're going to look at those gaps or whatever it may have been for forever, going,
Yeah.
number one, why did I buy this? And then number two, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't want readers to feel that way anymore. I certainly didn't like feeling that way, and I wouldn't like feeling that way either as a reader.
Mhm.
So now moving forward, it's ongoing series, and we're really focusing on the titles we have right now, which is Blood Realm,
Mhm.
Wolf and Batsy, Unit 44, Red Koi. It came out on a Wednesday as a great anthology horror sci-fi fantasy series. That's on issue 20 at this point,
Nice.
and King Cryptid, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Tinseltown
Oh,
too.
Horace H. Hoover as well. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then what about Tinseltown? Is that's an
Tinsel Tinseltown is it's still here, but it's like in hiatus between mini series.
gotcha.
And the only reason that I'm gonna let Dave continue with that is because he's always been so good about it. He's
Yeah.
not someone I really have to worry about.
Mhm.
He's had 2 previous other mini series at Alterna, so if
Mhm.
he does want to have a third here, he's more than welcome to bring
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
back.
He's a great guy. He's been on the show, and I really enjoyed him too. And he just had a successful indie too. Indiegogo.
Yeah, yeah. He just had his Kickstarter
Oh, it's
was for
Kickstarter.
Tinseltown. Yeah, he went out to Kickstarter. I think he's going to eventually do an Indiegogo as well for it. But his Kickstarter, and this is another interesting aspect at Alterna that's different
Mhm.
from other publishers too. We are 100% creator owned. So much so that if Alterna doesn't publish a certain type of book
Mhm.
in a format, the
Yeah.
creators are encouraged to do so if they want. So
Yeah.
we don't publish graphic novels anymore, which is ironic because that's all we published really
Yeah,
for
that's how you
10 to
started,
11
right?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we just do the single issues and then Alterna Giants sometime if it's a larger amount that we could put together that's under 100 pages or so.
Gotcha.
It's under 100 pages because, quite honestly, physically, that's all they could really do. That's the staple can't go through
Gotcha.
more than that. Dave's book is longer than 100 pages. So I said, Dave, it makes more sense if you just kind of put out a premium graphic novel version yourself. We did the first volume, but now
Yeah.
things have changed since then. So I encouraged him to do that Kickstarter, and he went for it, and he's going to put it out. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
first
That's the
one.
one I think you. Yeah. Right here. Alterna. Yeah. So yeah, I did talk to him. He said the second one he was doing on his own, but Alterna did do the first one.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man.
And I'm helping him. I'm putting the book together for him and everything. So I'm working for him now in terms of that aspect.
Nice.
But I'm happy to do that with the creators, and the same thing goes for everybody else. I know one day when Rob Geronimo has the whatever 50 issues or something he wants to tell, if he ever wants to put an omnibus or several omnibuses together, that would be a thing that he can do, and an endeavor that he can pursue, and keep whatever he were to make from that.
Yeah.
That's, I think, something that separates Alterna from a lot of other publishers as well.
Yeah, yeah. I read somewhere that you no longer distribute through Diamond, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We left all of our distributors in 2020.
Or was that an easy transition for you?
It was a relatively easy transition, and Diamond kind of made it that way. And the reason I say that is because not like they helped us out.
Yeah, yeah.
But they put us into a position that I would have rather not been in.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is in 2017, well, we had been with Diamond since 2008. So we were with them for 12 years. And in 2017, we were doing those newsprint issues. Now, what I was finding was that a lot of the time, when Diamond places an order, they order generally 10% more than whatever the order comes in for.
Okay.
Usually for any kind of damages, any kind of book that sells out right away, they can send stuff out to the retailer. I was finding a lot of our books, because of their price point, naturally, were selling through completely on the first day, and we would have hundreds of reorders immediately. So sometimes books would have 300 to 400 reorders immediately, and I'm seeing them in the system, and I'm thinking, oh, great, wonderful, they sold out, and we have a bunch here that I've overprinted, and we can ship them out, ASAP. Yeah. But the thing is, you can't do that. You have to wait till they send you an invoice. If you ship them, and you see them pile up, and let's say I go, okay, I'm going to be, really good about it, do my due diligence, and send them 300 copies. I see that they need it, right?
Yeah.
They go, oh, you know what? We're throwing those out. We're fining you $150.
What?
It happened to us once, and I never did it. I said, fine, I'm waiting from now on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, I see the orders there. When are you going to send us because they auto cancel after a month?
Oh, wow.
So I would see these orders pile up, and we would release 4 to 6 issues sometime. And sometimes that would happen across the board. We have like 1,000 reorders sitting there. I'm thinking, when are they going to send us the purchase order? It's the 3rd week now. They're going to auto cancel soon. And the retailers have been waiting for 3 weeks, which means that chances are a lot of the readers might have also been waiting or stopped waiting, and maybe went even to eBay and bought a $1.50 book at the time and bought it on eBay for like 5 or 6. Great for the eBay seller, not so much for me or the retailer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would contact the brand managers that we had, and a lot of the time I was able to force them to send us a purchase order. But as things went worse and worse over the course of 2018 or so, we would get these reorders. I couldn't do anything to force them to send us a reorder.
Oh, wow.
So as soon as it started happening, and we experienced that, I said, let's just start selling direct. We opened up an Etsy store at the time, and we were selling through Etsy. Eventually, the Etsy store was so successful, I figured, let's just pocket whatever Etsy's taking from us and open up my own store and directly on the site, and we'll sell through theirs. And that's what we did. By the time 2020 rolled around, our sales that were coming in, we were making more money on the site than we were through Diamond.
Oh, wow.
That's
awesome.
So if Diamond had did their job 100%, we never would have opened our own store.
Yeah.
So I would have just still been shipping through with them. I wouldn't have felt really the need.
Maybe, huh? Probably a blessing in disguise for all that.
Yeah. So it was a blessing in disguise. So in some ways, I do thank them for that. But yeah, that's why when it happened and we left, when the response to the pandemic had occurred and they were shutting down and they weren't going to pay people for 6 to 9 months and that kind of a thing, I said, we're already in a position where we sell direct anyway. Let's just start having pre-order crowdfunders and treat that as if we're soliciting through Diamond. And then this way we can still do that. We can sell direct, and then who knows, maybe it'll either still be the same or be better. So that's why it was easy for us to kind of transition right out of that, because we had already been selling direct for about 2 or 3 years at that point.
Oh, okay. So no losses or anything like that. It was easy transition, and it seems when I order, the shipping is extremely fast. So
yeah, it's very easy transition. And It's a shame because at first we did manage to retain about 50 to 60 of the retailers that we had books through. Because that's the other thing too. You go through distribution, you're getting access to all the comic shops, but all the comic shops don't order from you. I'd say roughly 20 to 25% of the shops are actually placing orders. So even though we were probably selling through to about 300 stores tops at one point, we retained like 50 or 60, but then slowly they kind of just dropped off, which was unfortunate because I'd like to get the books into the stores, but at the same time, you can't force a retailer to order from you. And all that happens in the long run too is that the customers that would have went to the store, they ended up just ordering through us direct, or they order through the crowdfunders and things like that. But this way, literally that we're doing it, this way has enabled me to make my own series finally again. Because the diamond system, you got to be in there every month. You got to put a lot of product out. You got to keep up with it. So it takes up a lot of time, and you're always, either on the phone or emailing retailers constantly every single month. So that takes up a lot of time as well. And you never really know if any of it's going to translate. It's a very cold process, and it could kind of feel demoralizing at times. But meanwhile, with the reader, when you're talking, you do a YouTube stream or send out a newsletter, or you're on social media interacting with the readers or talking about your stuff or whatever it may be, it's a way more celebratory kind of thing. When you have a crowdfunder and you get to see it and celebrate with everybody that made it possible, and then get the books out there, you send the books to Diamond, it's great, it goes in the comic store, but unless the reader then seeks you out and gets in touch with you, there's never really that connection of, are these books going to someone? Is anyone reading these? They go to a store, but I've been in stores, I'm always in the back issue bin area. I find issues all the time that have been around for 30 to 40 years. Are my books going to be like these books? There's always that thought, and I'd rather them be in someone's hands getting read. And I love being able to sell direct like that and knowing that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you said, there's something to being the first person to speak to your consumer, and then the last person to touch the product that reaches your consumer, right? When you have Diamond, or not just Diamond, anybody in between, right? You don't have that connection with the consumer where you're actually, I mean, like, I assume my King Cryptid came directly from you, right?
Yeah.
You sent it to me, right?
Yeah, so packed with love.
I can see your bloody fingers from all the tape and the boxes, but yeah, I mean, you were there, right? And so I think there's a little bit of satisfaction in any business knowing that you were the last person to touch your consumer. I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, and it's nice too because there's even like a quality control aspect to it. So if there's a mistake in the order, if for some reason or another there's a damage that is incurred, I'm able to respond to that. I'm able to kind of coordinate with the reader about that, and also use different, maybe pack it differently, send it differently, whatever it is. I can learn what I have to do better the next time around to minimize that thing from happening. When you ship stuff out, that was another problem too. If you ship stuff out to the distributor, sometime maybe there's a print run that happens that really didn't go that great, and it got damaged, or they printed something wrong or whatever. Now all those books went to distribution, and then I find out about it days later when our books come in, and I go, oh my Lord, this is horrible. And that honestly, that happened on the first shipment ever. Those first 4 issues, and they're probably like collector's items or something at this point.
They're on eBay for $1,000
but it was like a heartbreaking experience because it was all this excitement. We're putting this out, and it's one of those mistakes that only I would really know. But I think readers, some of them would probably go, these look a little off. And what happened was, and we only used this printer the one time because that's how bad it went. They had sent us the proofs. The proofs were great, and then the product, I get it back, and I adjusted it because I'm a graphic designer by trade and degree, and I go, these covers are completely off. They look like the cyan levels are up 20 to 25%, and so yellows looked greenish, greens looked dark. A lot of things were just off. It looked like there was too much cyan. And I was telling them and showing them, I'm like, these do not match the proofs you sent us. And they're trying to tell me this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, no, 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 they don't match at all. And they're like, oh, well, that can kind of happen with newsprint. I go, these are the covers. These are not, the newsprint actually printed fine. The covers, which are on glossy stock, printed horribly. And then I showed them, I said, this is what happens when I adjust the cover file with the cyan level and bump it up. It looks exactly like what I'm seeing here, and it shouldn't have happened over there. I was like, someone over there adjusted the file, or something happened during printing. And so, and those were the first 4 to go to shops. It was just like a gut punch.
Mortifying,
you know? Yeah, but if anybody has those that are out there, they're like the very, very first printings of Alterna. They're probably somewhat valuable at this point. We went back to print, I think, on those like 3 other times because for newsstand at the time. We had newsstand distribution for a little while too. And the newsstand editions printed great. We used a different printer and sent them the same files, and they printed great. What a miracle. Almost as if it wasn't our fault, but it was the printer's fault. But yeah, there's always something. There's always something, whether it's some craziness in comics or some craziness in printing or some craziness here or there. There's always some kind of fire to put out.
Yeah. Always, man. It's never smooth, right? And you got to be like a hawk, right? Constantly looking at everything, because I think it's normal that some mistakes do happen. And man, the minute you take your eye off the ball, right, that's usually when it happens.
Absolutely, yeah. And in that scenario, we couldn't even say, destroy him or anything like that. And if we did, we would have had to eat the loss on it. But it's stuff like that if that were to happen and it goes to me, then none of that goes out to the readers. And I'm able to coordinate with the printer and hopefully get them to do a reprint and then send the good stuff out to the readers. And the same thing goes if we have some damages sometime. There's always a couple damages in every box, top and bottom. But at distribution, they ship all that out. So they'll ship out the damaged copies within every box. They don't care if it's all crumpled and what. They're just sending that out, And it gets to the retailer and they're like, what the heck is this? I'm the unlucky. Yeah, and then they think exactly, all that. It's madness. But all that madness, we don't have to deal with it. If anything, we actually sell the damaged copies now at a discount, so people can go to the site and get these damages. And sometimes they wonder what's even damaged about them. But I'm like, trust me, if you're someone who's looking for a mint copy, you understand the damage I'm talking about that's on the copies, however minimal.
Since when I'm going to purchase one, it does say like mint, near mint. I'm like, I'm wondering why that's even an offer. Now I get it. Now that
we do reader copy, which is the book's intact. It's great, but it's got a couple of creases and it looks pretty beat up. And but those are great with our all ages books, especially if you've got kids. They're gonna beat the crap out of them as soon as they get them anyway. Like when I was a kid, your comics are you read through them like crazy.
Roll them up and just put them in your pocket.
Exactly. I've got comics of Spider-Man where Spider-Man's eyes are colored in, just for some reason I thought blue pen, right on all the eyes. That made sense.
Now, as far as you yourself as a writer, creator, artist, because you're all 3, right? I think on the chair, which was one of your first, if I'm not mistaken, you did the art as well, right?
No, another artist had done that, and
sorry, I thought you did too.
I did everything on that, but with the art, I had wanted the artist to do a loose, sketchy pencil thing, and the reason I'm going to refrain, I would normally always give credit by name to the artist, but the artist over the years has decided that I should not give him credit ever. He doesn't want to be associated with it and whatever else. People are weird. So I'm not trying to rob him of his credit. I would love to say his name, but so he did the art on that, and I wanted like this loose, sketchy pencil style, and I was going to kind of add digital inks over it that mimicked like a charcoal effect. So this was back in the day, like 2006, 2007, and I'm doing it with like a mouse and stuff and coloring it all with a mouse. But that was... there you go. I kind of put out like a remastered, re-edited, and re-lettered version with those single issues. That was in 2017.
This must be one of those, right? Because this came in that pack of number 1s that I.
Yep. Yeah. So that's different in some ways from the very first time it was ever printed, and then a couple of the graphic novel editions as well. But that's the last edition, and that's kind of like, I guess, a creator cut. you could
Yeah.
say. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, that those came out as a 4 issue mini, which again is funny because that book really just primarily came out as a graphic novel,
Mm,
and again, people were reading that the whole thing, and then they would let me know what they thought.
yeah.
But when that came out in single issue format, roughly 10 years later, and people
Yeah.
thought it was a brand new book too,
Yeah.
they would be sending me emails and messages and guessing about the plot and what's happening, and I was like, wow, this is a very different experience than when it first came out, you know. So it
Yeah.
was great.
You had quite a bit of success from what I read on the internet concerning the chair, right?
Yeah. So it got turned into a film. It got adapted into film with
Yeah.
Roddy Piper,
Which
and
is crazy, man. I read that.
yeah,
Oh man, I gotta go. I gotta find it now and watch it.
yeah. I believe it's a couple different places. The last time I checked, it was on Tubi.
Okay.
We also sell it as a DVD Blu-ray combo on the site. But
Nice.
it was a lot of fun casting the film.
Hmm.
And there was a couple people that were going to be in Roddy's position. At one point in time, we had Eric Roberts, and he was going to be in it. But Eric Roberts works on everything, and he
Yeah.
just signs because what is you got to get letters of intent. So you have these LOIs, and the actor agrees that they like the script, and they agree to be in the film. So you can tentatively announce them in it.
Hmm.
But it's not a contract or anything like that. So what happens is between that point to the projected production date, if
Hmm.
something were to happen and they get something that is guaranteed work in a contract or whatever, they could sign out of it and then we part ways. So that kind of happened with Eric Roberts, where he signs on to so many projects that he was busy at that point. So we had to scramble and get somebody else. And it was really funny because I've loved Roddy for forever. One of
Yeah.
my favorite wrestlers of all time. Loved him in They Live. And They Live was on one day, and me and my wife were basically watching it and going, why don't we see if Roddy Piper could do it? He'd do a good job as that
Yeah.
part. And I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, I've contacted everybody that you could think of for the lead roles of the Warden and Sullivan. I had
Hmm.
contacted Willem Dafoe. I contacted Viggo Mortensen.
Oh wow.
I talked to a whole bunch of different people, Sean Bean, so it's talked to a whole list and got rejected by all. Some were very nice about it.
Yeah.
A couple different character actors for certain roles. Doug Jones was awesome. He was great. Sent me back this full email and saying how heartbroken he was that he couldn't be a part of it, but he was doing this other filming, but he read the script and really liked it. And so many great people out there that had took some time to respond. But when we got Roddy, it was very surreal because I was like,
So
"That's interesting." I'm like, "All right, but I figured, what's the worst that could happen? They say no or they don't respond, you
exactly.
know? Yeah." So he had loved the script. I talked to him several times on the phone, and what would always turn into him, he was, and as great as some of the actors were in the film,
Hmm.
he was the only one who would call me up with ideas about the character.
Nice.
And he would always call me up and preface it with the fact that because he wanted to do right by me. He's like, this is your character. I want to do right by you. I want to make sure that I shoot this past you first.
That's awesome.
He had ideas about like the character having a toothpick all the time, and his character's hair like slicking it back, and all this other kind of stuff, and then different ideas for when he's in. If you watch the film, it's kind of, you see two versions of reality in the film, and then the second half of the film, how his character would kind of look, and how his attitude would shift a bit.
Mhm.
But we would always have these talks, and he'd call up about that. But then we'd be on the phone for an hour, and he would just be talking about life, and he'd be asking me about my family and my life, and creating, and he'd be talking about his past and his life and his family. And the family was really important to Roddy. He was a family man, and just a wonderful guy. And even he left such a big impression on me in terms of how to treat the fans.
Mm.
He'd talk about, I go to a show, and these people that are here for me, and I don't care if the line's around the building. I don't care if we're closing down soon or whatever. He's like, we're gonna go elsewhere. Everybody meet me over here. I'm gonna make sure everybody that came to see me sees me today.
Awesome,
And
man.
he'd always spend time with people in the line. He wouldn't rush anybody. And he's like, because if it wasn't for these people, I wouldn't have anything that I have. So it's important for me to take this time to give back to them. And anyone that's ever met Roddy, I've only heard the best from them about that experience. And I could tell you, it meant a lot to him to have these people that that were there to support him and his career, and I'll never forget that. And I always try to remember that too with what I do in regards to respecting the fans and being thankful that they're there.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, you think
Would
it's
think,
common
right?
sense, and it was a bit prophetic because I had that conversation with him. I'd say sometime around 2014, early 2015,
Yeah,
because he passed away in July of 2015,
right. Yeah,
and just a couple of years after that, there's this big hullabaloo all over the place that if you're a fan out there and you ever express a dissenting opinion about anything, all of a sudden you're the worst being that ever existed, and it's such a shame. It's unfortunate,
it
but
is.
I'm glad that I got the ability to get to know Roddy and become fast friends with him, and it was unfortunate because he was in my neck of the woods a couple months before he had passed. I believe April. He was at a
Mm.
show, and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna be by you in April. You think you could come by and be at the show?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm so busy right now with everything." And I'm like, "When's the next time you think you'll be here?" And he's like, "Oh, probably in the fall or something like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's connect around then." And he's like, "Okay, yeah, you got it, man. Love you, brother." Right? And I had that text message, and then he passed away in July, and I was just crushed.
Yeah.
You're such a good dude, and whatever happens with that movie, like that was worth it to get to know one of my childhood heroes,
For sure.
and they say never meet your heroes or anything like that, but
Yeah.
apparently whoever said that never met Roddy Piper because
Yeah.
he's everything he could have thought of and more. He was just wonderful, just a great dude.
Nah, I mean, I always said never got a chance to meet him, but certainly growing up watching the old WWF, and man, I mean, I think he was a fan favorite. And I actually listened to an interview from Ronda Rousey and how she went to him and asked if it was okay if she utilized, some of the things that he did in wrestling when she came in, because she's also known as Rowdy Ronda, right? And she talks about how amazing he was to talk to before he passed, and just what an honor it was to work with him and to get his blessing. So, yeah, you're not the only one that has said that. So you're starting to see trends. You start to think, well, this guy was really genuinely a great person.
Yeah, yeah, he was a
I've
great
watched
guy.
a documentary of him and stuff like that. But so happy for you that you were able to build that kind of relationship with him before he passed, and
Oh
just
yeah,
the big hole in the wrestling world.
it was great, and it was just awesome to be able to become even the level of friendship that we had. And I regret never being able to meet him or anything like that, but we had a bunch of phone calls and texts and whatnot, and it was always great. And like I said, a lot of it, he starts off with it being business, and then it always turned into just talking about whatever with Roddy. It was always awesome.
That's so cool, man. Oh man, that is awesome. So, as far as Alterna now, I mean, Pete, what do you think the future is for Alterna? Where do you think what do you think's next? I mean, I feel like you've created a lot of success. You got a lot of really good things going. You have some amazing brands right now, like you said, Red Koi, Unit 44, which is hilarious. Go on and on, man. There's a lot of really good stuff. What else is going on?
I mean, honestly, at this point in time,
Mm-hmm.
well, we've shut down submissions, and the reason I've done that is a couple years back I thought I would have to do it, and the reason why is because of the fact that I saw that more and more people entering comics were
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah.
They were entrepreneurial. They were people who didn't need a publisher. I'm
Yeah.
the last person that's going to say you need a publisher to make your comic.
Sure. Sure.
Could a good publisher help you out? Sure. Are there a lot of bad publishers in the business, even at the indie level? Yes. But if you're someone who you're willing to put in the time, the effort, the work, the passion is there, the drive is there, your skill set is there, you're willing to build that up, there's no reason you can't do exactly what I'm doing or more.
Mm-hmm.
Many people have, which is wonderful to see. But I figured that that's what was going to start happening because that's kind of the way the industry was going.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, there's been a reduction of middlemen across the board. The
For
same
sure.
way that we reduced our usage of middlemen,
Yeah.
I was predicting that's the way things are going to go for a lot of people too. It's
Yeah.
not something personal. It's not like, oh, I don't want to be published with Pete because of X, Y, or Z. It was more just because you just don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They could go straight to crowdfunding. They could set up their own website. All the similar things that I'm doing.
Yep.
So I figured, well, that's great for them, but it doesn't help me out necessarily. So what could I do? So I figured I'm gonna have to probably start making my own series again. So really get in that frame of mind. It's a whole different frame of mind than publishing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I'm gonna focus more on the books that we have, especially the ones that are gonna be ongoing.
Hmm.
So that's kind of what we're doing is I'm focusing more on that. The only kind of submissions that are still open at Alterna would be for It Came Out on a Wednesday, which is an anthology.
Okay.
So just for short stories.
Yeah.
But series submissions, I've tried doing that. Last year was the first year I didn't accept any submissions. I found that there's all the really talented, skilled creators. Like I said, they're kind of carving their own path. They don't necessarily need to submit to a publisher like me.
Yeah.
And all the others that are out there are really rushing to
Yeah.
get their comics made to the point that they're not taking the time to learn how to make comics for the most part. So they're at a stage where they're not ready yet for a publisher, and if anything, going through a publisher would just not only make the experience worse for them, I
Yeah.
think it'll also be a deterrent to them
Sure.
because they'd get exposed too quickly to the business side of things, which is very much you have to perform, and if you don't perform, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if your book isn't of quality, because I also don't want to turn people see the Alterna logo and they go, oh, they publish anything that comes to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't trust it. But meanwhile, like you said, there's so much good stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I've been very selective over the years. So if I find that the selection process isn't being generally great to a lot of the newcomers coming on board,
Hmm.
it's best for me to just say, you know what, we're going to just lean back a bit, focus on what we have.
Yeah.
And the other creators out there are either going to do their own thing or they're going to learn as much as they can. They're going to do what they got to do.
Yeah.
But right now we're just going to focus on the lineup that we have. And I want to focus on getting more King Cryptid issues out as well. That series is very important to me.
Yeah.
Getting in that creative mindset all over again. Like I said, it's a different thing than publishing,
Yeah.
and I've got so many stories for King Cryptid. So I'm gonna do, reader willing, I'm gonna make this series for the rest of my life. I have that
Yeah.
many stories to tell. So if we're
Nice.
putting out 5 or so issues every year,
Hmm.
we'll see how it goes because maybe they'll hit a point where I'm putting out 8 to 10 issues a year,
Yeah.
and do 2 campaigns a year and get things really full steam ahead. But yeah, I'm mostly just focusing on the issues and the titles we already have and my own series, of course.
Is there like a number of titles that you think is a sweet spot for Alterna, or not necessarily?
I think we're at a good place right now. I think we've got about, if I have to guess off the top of my head, I think we got about 7.
Okay. Yeah.
Seven's a good number.
Hmm.
I like the number 7. I
Yeah.
was
It's
born
good.
in July, so
Yeah.
7's good. Um, but other than that, I mean, to me, it's whatever works for what the publisher can do. I think at one point in time we were publishing about 15 to 18 titles at the same time, and not every month, but
Yeah.
they would alternate here and there, and some would be on a quarterly, some would be bi-monthly, some would be just whatever for 3 or 4 issues, and that would be that.
Yeah.
But for us, I think being kind of sleek and more able to focus on what we've got is a
Hmm.
better path moving forward than some publishers in the industry. You really do get the sense that they don't publish everything that comes through to them, but they publish anything that looks decent enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can't get behind that.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that I actually care about and like the
Yeah. Yeah.
stories that I'm publishing, not just the aspect of, I guess someone will like it, right?
Yeah.
It feels disingenuous to say, yeah, you should go buy this, when it's like, do I turn around and go, well, yeah, I wouldn't buy it, but you should go buy it. So anything that we publish at Altern, I've always made sure to go, would I buy this? And I say, yes, I would. And that's a deciding factor. And then I go, okay, well, then this is what determines whether or not I would publish it.
Mhm.
Sometimes, though, there's things that have come through that I would buy it, but at the end of the day, I don't think that I necessarily am the best person to put this book out. I think if it went to a different publisher that maybe could help it out in a certain way, I think they'd be better off there. And I would communicate that to the creator.
Mhm.
But yeah, the way we're at Alterna right now, I think is great. And If we unfortunately have to cut any of the titles, I mean, it happens. It is what it is. But I love all the ones here. I don't want to see any of them go. So hopefully we manage to publish all of them for as long as they want to continue to make issues, of course.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then as far as how often one of your creators needs to produce, you said quarterly. Is that for most, like for Unit 44 Koi, it seems like they're coming out either twice a year or 4 times a year. Does that sound right, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay.
Yeah, right now we're scaling back to 3 alternate campaigns a year, and then the
Okay.
King Cryptid campaign.
Hmm.
I'll see how that plays out this year because every single year is a learning experience, you know,
Yeah.
and then make any adjustments for next year. If this works out, great, we'll do it the same way next year. If not, we'll kind of retool things for that. But yeah, it's about right. 2 to 4, I guess you could say at this point, 2 to 3 times. Sometimes there's issues that are in a different position. Wes likes to get a head start on Unit 44 issues, so he always has like 2 or 3 issues done in advance,
Yeah.
which works in case we don't have someone else that was managed to get their stuff done. And then Brian with Wolf and Batsy, he's in a very different position where he's mostly remastering a lot of the older issues that he did with a couple new issues here and there that'll be sprinkled throughout.
Okay.
So he really is in a position to have a leg up on everybody else.
Yeah.
That's why, like on this campaign that we have right now, he's got issues 8 and 9
Mm.
because he's able to get that done because the large part of the work for those issues is done.
Yeah.
But that's another surprising thing is that there's people discovering that for the first time. And Wolf and Batsy has largely been out for about almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
Didn't know it until I got it in your packet of your number one.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I'd seen it around here and there. But, you know, when I was talking to him, I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of people that most likely have not read your book.
yeah.
And I knew that firsthand from publishing The Chair as a graphic novel and then re-releasing it as a single issue.
Yeah.
It was surprising. I figured that was going to be one of our worst selling single issues because everyone already had the graphic novel. Why would they buy this? You know, I even made it $1 for the first printing just to make up for the fact that, yeah, I know this has been out 4 other times as a graphic novel already. But people were still picking it up and
Yeah.
discovering it for the very first time. So I said, if that's going to happen for mine, it's going to happen for yours. And sure enough, it did. And it became a fast favorite here at Alterna among a lot of the readers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. What a rewarding feeling, too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think it is a different reader, right? Like I have some graphic novels for sure, but I mostly have floppies. That's what I enjoy. I love holding it in my hand. I love being able to read it in like 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes, depending on how many pages. And then, like you had mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, you're able to create this this desire to kind of guess what's going to happen next when you're able to put it in 24, 28 pages. Whereas if you have
Yeah.
a novel, like you said, you get through the whole thing and you're done. And you're like, I want more. Well, it's going to be a while before you get more, if you get
Yeah, yeah.
more.
And I find a lot of the things too with in terms of creating,
Mm-hmm.
creators should look at the graphic novel as a film
Mm.
and the single issue as an episode of a TV show.
Okay, yeah.
You know, if you look at it like that, it's a lot easier to wrap your mind around how you would tell that story.
Yeah,
Because if you treat it like a episodic kind of thing where you're only giving snippets here or there and whatever, it might feel a bit, I don't know, a bit bare in terms of the graphic novel. You know, the pacing doesn't necessarily need to be slower,
mm-hmm.
but you do need to develop certain aspects of it more.
Yeah.
You know,
A little more
um,
talent.
yeah, but on a single issue, every page, every panel counts, so you got to really make them count, and you have to maximize that. I feel like as the industry went more towards writing for the trade
Mm-hmm.
and making graphic novels, we lost a lot of that condensed, compressed storytelling,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it turned into this drawn out type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was then eventually it wasn't like each issue in like some 6 to 12 issue miniseries or something was really jam packed with awesome stuff. If it,
Yeah.
it was more like, no, let's take something that I was telling in like 2 issues and let's really stretch that out. You know, so like they're not really writing.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a monthly book and let's say it's 12 a year. they're not really writing 12 stories in a
Right,
year.
right, right,
They're writing maybe one or two, and
right,
they're
right.
stretching them out, you know. And what
Exactly.
happens is you're not paying like $4 or $5 in an issue for
Yeah.
a singular story. You're paying like 20 to 30 for a
Yeah.
singular story, you know.
Exactly.
And yeah, so
You did
it's
issue 5 to even figure out what's going on in this comic.
yeah, exactly. You know, but back when I got into comics, and every single thing I ever loved too about episodic storytelling in animated shows, like
Mhm.
Batman the animated series is
Oh,
like the pinnacle of that for me. You know, really great. X-Men was great. Spider-Man in the 90s was great. And then even shows in the 80s, you get Thundercats, even
oh,
He-Man and shows like that, G.I.
yeah, G.I.
Joe,
Joe. Oh, yeah.
Transformers, you know, all these great episodic stories
Mhm.
where they packed in like every single moment mattered. You know, there wasn't just like lounging around. There wasn't just like characters thinking in
Yeah.
moments and just things like getting, you know, slow pace, and everything was just like, you know, over and over, and just, yeah, you were just absorbed into it. It grabbed your attention. And that's the beauty of single issue storytelling and episodic storytelling. If you kind of get away from that, it
Mhm.
just feels like, you know, you're losing that punch that each issue can pack.
Mhm.
And then with that, you can actually have this organic world building occur
Mhm.
where you don't have to have an event, because
Mhm.
every issue's an event, you
Right.
know. And then every issue you tell some other snippet and moment of this character's life and what characters they're meeting at that moment and where they are at that time. And then before you know it, you're 20, 30 issues in and you have a universe that you've just created,
Yeah.
you know. Whereas the other way around, it's like you're kind of just drawing everything out, and it's really just everything's kind of like a character piece, and it just turns into, by the time you get to like issue 8 out of the 12 issue mini, you either know where this is going
Yeah.
or you don't care.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, so you'll see it around. There's so many of them, especially when they get to like these 10 to 12. You see them by around that time, the 3/4 mark in the story.
Yeah.
You see that they don't really know what they're doing anymore, you know. And by the time it wraps up, it's a very "'cause I said so,"
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And it's like, oh, come on. Yeah.
Then it's like a real rushed ending, and you're like, "What the heck?" You could have drawn that out and made it more interesting instead of having these 3 issues that mean zero.
Exactly. Or when they're talking about this kind of story that's going to occur and it's going to change everything, you know, it's changed the status quo for forever,
Yeah.
and like maybe it does,
Yeah.
but not, it's not for forever, you know. It's going to go right back. And then nowadays, when you have the companies that make films and things like that, you'll find that it's going to go back or it's going to change right around the time of a film, you know.
Yeah.
So now they're being used essentially as like marketing
Yeah.
to drive the larger thing,
Almost
which
like
is such a,
flyers, right? They're just trading.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is such a shame, because comics are a wonderful medium, and they shouldn't be treated as like, you know, the, you know, and I don't want to offend anybody with this, but this is a phrasing from back in the day. They
Mhm.
shouldn't be treated like the redheaded stepchild
Yeah. Yeah.
of movies. You
It's,
know, they should be treated as the bona fide thing that they are,
yeah.
which is a beautiful medium, and it's very capable of telling these important, impactful stories that have influenced the ability to create billion-dollar movies. Not, they shouldn't play second fiddle to that type of a thing. And it's a shame to see that a lot of it sometimes is treated that way, but not in the indie realm, which is great so far. Maybe
Yeah.
one
So
day we'll
I'm
get to
starting to
that
see it
point.
kind of creep in, though, Pete. I don't know if you see it in the indie scene where you have people come in and they're writers, and the purpose of writing the comic book is to be able to create that medium that leads into a movie.
Yes.
So the goal
Yeah.
is a movie, and my comic book is going to help me get there. And I also think that takes away from, comic books, I think, as well. I don't know if you feel the same way. Like the
I've
promotion
gotten
shit
submissions
is
like
wrong.
that.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I've gotten submissions like that,
Oh, okay.
where they'll lead with they have plans to develop this and get it produced, and I'm like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
You know, I want to hear about you're going to make the best comic possible for the readers out there that are going to read the comic.
Yep.
Worry about that other stuff later, you
Yeah.
know. And especially as someone who's made a film, I got to tell you, more people have read and loved the comic than have seen and loved the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not like you just get a movie going and then that's it. You know, the skies have opened and pennies from heaven are dropping down. You know, it's still like let's not get ahead of ourselves. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people that want to use that as like a foot in the door into Hollywood or whatever it may be, and then treat the comic as a storyboard already made for a producer. And I don't want people making comics for the producer. I want you making comics for the reader.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's such a good point, Pete. Such a good point. Man, we covered a lot, my friend.
Yes, we did. You said a
Yeah,
half hour, and I was like, we're not going a half
yeah,
hour.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna talk for way more than that.
I mean, we go as long as you want, man. But no,
This is good. This is good.
no, I can't thank you enough, Pete, for coming on, man. Anytime you don't know someone, they're like, "Hey, come to my show." You're like, "Ah." At least I would be. I'm like, "Oh, let me look at your show first." But I really appreciate it, man. We just want to get to know you. You have a very successful brand. You have some amazing stories that are being told. And like I said, I've interviewed a few of the writers that are already for Alterna. And I'm like, man, let's see if we could just get Pete on and ask him his opinion on how the industry is and how he got into it, because I think it's a story that it sounds like it's been told a lot of times. And I've certainly listened to you, I think, on John's Long Box, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, yeah. John's great. Yeah.
Great guy. And I actually listened to the one where you talked about some of the submissions and a little bit of the frustration around all the submissions and whatnot. And I think those are really good to listen to if you're creating a comic book, because there's some really good advice there. But I also wanted just to get to know you and my fan base to get to know you too, because if you're not buying Alterna, you're making a mistake, man. It's a great indie brand and a lot of really good stuff to read.
Thank you, man. Yeah, there's a ton of great creators here. A lot of really fun stories. These are full on escapist stories with heart. Just
Absolutely.
classic storytelling, and
Yeah,
then they look like classic comics. They're on
love
newsprint
it.
and everything too.
My
But
favorite part about it too, man. And not only do
yeah,
they look that way, they have that more modern stories to it that you could relate to and that you could get lost in, but it has that old school feel to it. And I mean, I buy a lot of comics, Pete, a lot of comics. And to find a comic for $1.50 or even $2.99 is impossible anymore. I think when I saw Mark Miller came out with a comic book and he was charging $1.99, I almost fell out of my chair. Alterna's the
yeah,
only one that has those price points. What are you doing,
right.
man? So
Yeah, and I'm not going to fault him necessarily for it, but the rest of the comic news media,
yeah,
they want to pretend Alterna doesn't exist.
oh, they exist.
And
They
I
exist.
was like,
Yeah, yeah, they
all
definitely
right, all right.
exist. No, I really appreciate Pete coming on, and thank you for your time. And anybody who's listening, man, if you haven't been to alternacomics.com, you better get on that, and then watch on Indiegogo. It sounds like about 3 times a year you could get caught up on a lot of really good comics by supporting the Alterna Comics Indiegogos. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got a campaign right now that's on both Indiegogo and our website, alternacomics.com/pre-order would be the easiest way to go right to it. But you could go to alternacomics.com, you'll find it right there. And then it's also on Indiegogo. We got 5 new comics on there. You get 5 new comics in 2023
yeah,
for $12.
yeah, you can't beat it, man. It's just incredible. Uh,
I
that
tell
alone,
people that and they're like 12 each. I'm like, no, 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 no. All together, $12.
yeah, that alone makes me a fan. And then to know it's great quality too on top of it. I mean, it's just incredible, bro.
Oh yeah, yeah. These, and like I said, these stories, it's the equivalent of getting in on the ground floor of when Stan and Jack or Stan and Steve were starting out telling their stories. You know, the little indie company that could over there at Marvel in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like getting on the ground floor of that because you're getting it directly from the creator. No matter what creator you love nowadays,
Hmm.
I'd say about 90 to 95% of them were not the people who created those characters.
Yeah,
So you're really supporting the cover band, and they're
yeah,
playing a good cover sometimes, and sometimes the cover is not so good, but that's what you're really kind of supporting when you're supporting the mainstream corporate comics. But when you're getting on the ground floor at anything at Alterna or any of the indies out there being made by these creators that have come up and envisioned these characters, you're supporting the people directly who have had a big part, if not the part, in
yeah.
creating these things, and that's kind of cool.
It is. And I'll be honest, a lot of these creators that I've reached out to are just down to earth, and they're really good people. And they, like you said, they have an amazing story to be told. And they're accessible, man. It's awesome, man. I love it. I love the medium. Indie is where it's at, I think, right now. Obviously, you see behind me, I love the big two too, and I probably always will. But I think indie is where it's currently at right now
Oh
because those
yeah.
stories can be told, and you don't have 90 years or 80 years of canon that you have to kind of hold to. And that's how we get a King Cryptid or a Red Koi or a Unit 44. You don't get those if you're in the big two because where do you fit it?
Yeah. If you look at comics, every 30 years, some kind of creative explosion occurs.
Yeah,
You know, so 30 years ago we had Image. 30 years before that, you had the 60s with Stan and Jack and
yeah,
Marvel. 30 years before that, you have Superman and Batman coming on the scene.
good point.
You know, so we're in that again. We're in that cycle of a creative explosion, this new generation of creators across the board. And who's to say 30, 60 years from now or whatever, we don't see a cameo from Peter Simeti in a King Cryptid movie or whatever it may be. You know, so it's one of those things of you just never know. And not to say that I'm pushing for a movie. I'm absolutely not. I've done movies.
Been there,
I'm
done that.
all set. I'm all set. Comics is it for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Animated series would be kind of cool,
That
but
would be
but
really cool.
yeah, but comics, that's where my heart is and that's where my passion is. But that's what I'm talking about is there's all these great creators, all these great characters that are being made, and there's
Yeah,
so much potential right now. So if there's anybody out there looking for something new, something exciting, uh, don't waste your time on the mainstream because that's fleeting. Even
yeah.
when they create something that seems like it's new,
Mhm.
it's very fleeting because eventually they're going to go back to Old Faithful and come
Yeah,
back to that classic character that makes the money, and that's that. But if you're looking for something new and exciting and something that's right at the cutting edge, a lot of the time you're going to find that with indie comics across the board.
agree, agree. Well, Pete, appreciate you coming on, my friend. Thank you for your time, and man, hope we could do this again sometime.
Absolutely, man. It was great. Thank you so much. And you did an awesome job. Live show, everything. You know, hey, Daryl, hey, Logan, what's up? Creators Outlet, you guys too.
I
Thank you
know
for
when I saw
watching
the
tonight.
comments coming in, I'm like, oh God, thank you. It worked, man. I didn't screw this up. No, I appreciate it. I'll do some more lives because of you, Pete. I love it, man.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. It's fun. The more you do it, the more you get people in the chat that are engaging, and then they'll throw questions too, and you know
Yeah,
they get involved. It's wonderful.
yeah, agree with you. Agree with you. Awesome, Pete. Well, have a great one. Thanks everyone for joining, and until next time, you know, join us, man. World at War Comics and Alterna Comics, man. Thanks everyone.
Thank you guys.
Talk soon.